Yep. Hello, good evening, everyone. Going to throw up some slides as usual. Taking a bit of a break from Daniel for a change. Um, it's, to be honest, it's a bit of a hard slog, and I don't mind taking a bit of a break from that to consolidate my thoughts a bit and do a bit of rewriting. Uh, Looks like screen sharing's still disabled. Could someone switch that on? So I was reading the story of Israel's conquest of Canaan and their invasion into the Promised Land. And I was quite surprised to find that they only wandered in the wilderness for 38 years before they started to settle down. I'd always thought it was 40 years, and I suppose 40 years all told before they crossed the Jordan. But oh, there we go. All right. So I'm going to talk about the land of Gilead, which is sort of the stuff on the eastern side of the Jordan. Um, they wandered for 38 years before they started to settle down initially in this land of Gilead. So it says in Deuteronomy 3, verse 13, Moses is talking. He says, "Now rise up," said I, "and get you over the brook Zered." And we went over the brook Zered, and the space in which we came from Kadesh Barnea, which is where they were uh, when they tried to get into the promised land the first time, until we were come over the brook Zered, was 30 and 8 years, until all the generation of the men of war were wasted out from among the host, as the Lord sware unto them. Now, this picture here is actually a different brook. This is the brook Jabbok, which is a bit further than further north than the Zered, but similar landscape. So this is what Gilead would have looked like, um, something like this. So crossing the Zered, let me get the laser pointer, which is down here, I think. Yep, Zered River. They went from Kadesh Barnea, wandered through the wilderness for 38 years, and then eventually up by the way of Edom and crossed the brook Zered. And that brought them into the land of Gilead, which is all of this stuff on the eastern side of the Jordan. You got, most of the land of Israel over here, but then over here, that's Gilead. Up the north, it's a region called Bashan as well. Um, so Gilead was the country of the Moabites and the Ammonites. They were fellow Hebrews. They spoke the same language. They looked the same. They were close relatives because they were the children of Lot. Now, things didn't go so well between the Israelites and the Moabites over the next couple of years. So the Israelites did end up taking all of their land and all of their cities. Um, and then finally, when they reached year 40, uh, sort of 2 years later, then they crossed the Jordan over here and went and started conquering all the promised land, all the land of Canaan. So while most of Israel settled down on the west side of the Jordan, three tribes, Reuben, Gad, and half of the tribe of Manasseh, stayed on the eastern side. That's because they had lots of cows and sheep, and it was really good grazing land for them. And on the face of it, it sort of sounds like they rejected the promises of God. They rejected the promised land for the sake of worldly gain. And they're giving up all the protection that the river provides for the sake of getting better cows and that. Well, that's perhaps not entirely the case. In Genesis 15 verse 18, this is the initial promise of the promised land that the Lord gave to Abraham. Genesis 15:18 says, "In the same day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, Unto thy seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates." So the promised land of Israel went all the way from the Nile there, right the way up to the Euphrates, which sort of runs down there. So it's this massive area here, which, historically Israel didn't even come close to possessing that. They sort of got that bit there, and maybe a little bit on the other side. That being said, um, this is the area in Gilead where some of the tribes stayed behind. So it's well within the boundaries of what the Lord promised to them. They weren't disobeying the Lord. They weren't rejecting his inheritance, nothing like that. And they weren't bad people either. In 1 Kings chapter 17, we see that the prophet Elijah actually came from Gilead. So they were, by all accounts, a godly people, a God-fearing people who stuck to the law and abode in part of the promised land. Now, the northern part of Gilead Bashan, which I mentioned before, it is renowned for being good cattle country. For example, in Psalm chapter 22, verse 12, David says, "Many bulls have compassed me round about. Strong bulls of Bashan have beset me round." Talking about these powerful um, cows from that area. And today, that part of Gilead, Bashan, the part of that Israel still controls today it's called the Golan Heights, and it's still the best part of the country for grazing cattle. This is actually a photo of it here. You can see there's good pasture, there's healthy cows, all that kind of thing. So, and the reason for it, this northern part of Gilead, sort of up here, we can see a bit of the topography of the area. You sort of get this valley where the Jordan River is, and then there's some quite steep cliffs, and then these flat tablelands up there, and sort of mountainous areas a bit further south. What this does with the weather, the clouds kind of hit that. All of this stuff down by the Jordan is quite dry, but then up in these elevated regions, it gets a lot of rainfall. So it's very good, like well-watered, wide, flat land, which is really good for the crops and the cattle and that kind of thing. But as you go further east, you start to get into the Arabian desert out here. The land gets very dry. It's not so good for crops, but it's perfect condition for plants that produce incense. Things like this. This is the balm of Gilead. So the lack of water in the area sort of concentrates all the oils in the sap of these plants. So they end up, kind of scraggly in that, but they've got a very dense, sort of rich smelling resin. And they use this plant, the resin in this plant, to make a medicine called the balm of Gilead, which had apparently been known about for a long time. It's kind of been lost to history. Like this may not have actually been the actual balm of Gilead, but it's something that grew in the region that seems to match all the right properties of it. So in Genesis 37:25, when Joseph is taken as a slave into Egypt by Ishmaelite traders, those Ishmaelite traders had come through trading balm of Gilead. Also in Jeremiah 8 verse 22, it's mentioned again. It says, "Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there?" It was this famous product of the region that they had. Now, looking at the territory of these three tribes that are settled there, further south we have the tribe of Reuben. Reuben settled right on the shores of the Dead Sea. And you can see in this satellite area, it does look fairly dry and brown, but like that area to the north, you get sort of a very dry region around the banks of the Jordan. But this area here is sort of, again, elevated tablelands, and you get quite a lot of rain and green fields there. I've got some photos of that, which I'll show later. So this area was, it's probably looking like that because maybe it's a time of year when the crops are ready to harvest and they've all sort of turned white. It does get quite green otherwise though. But having a look at some of the cities on this map, I'll just point out some of the things that are there. So for example, we have the city Medeba, which is still there today, called Madaba instead. It's one of these ancient cities that sort of stood the test of time, like Damascus, and that it's lasted 3 or 4 millennia. We've got a few cities here like Beth Baal Meon. The name Beth pops up in a lot of these cities. It means house, the Hebrew word for house. It's kind of a word that they use in a lot of their cities. A lot of very similar to the way that we use like somethingville or something town. Like you get Bethlehem, for example. Beth is house and Lehem is bread. So it's like Breadsville. Um, and then this other city I'll just point out, Kiriath Aim. This part of the word Kiriath or Kirjath, as it appears in some other names, means city. So this is Kiriath Aim, the city of Aim. We also see that Kiriath show up in the name of Judas Iscariot. Iscariot is like Ish Kiriath. It means man of the city. Just a little interesting aside. So moving a bit further north, we have the tribe of Gad, where they settled. So Gad was the staging area for Israel's invasion of Canaan. They crossed the Jordan somewhere just north of the Dead Sea, somewhere around here, and crossed over and fought Jericho as soon as they crossed. Um, they set up camp in Gilgal, which is about here. It's not shown on the map. There's a few more Beth cities around here, like Beth Namrah, Bet Onim, which is Beth Onim. And another one I'll point out is Hamath Mizpah. Hamath shows up in a few city names around the place. Hamath means fortress, and Mizpah means watchtower. So this was the fortress of the watchtower. It was a fenced city, a walled city on top of this mountain ridge where they could see the land all around them and they could see any invading armies coming up there. So it was kind of a stronghold and a refuge on top of this mountain where they could see everyone coming. And the third tribe around there was the eastern portion of Manasseh. And Manasseh had this huge area running all along the east bank of the Jordan and past the Sea of Galilee. And as I mentioned before, this northern part here was called Bashan, where it was really good cattle country. You can see over here, it's quite green and lush. A couple of other interesting cities to note: the Ramoth Gilead. There was a few other Ramoths around the place, but this was the Ramoth in the area of Gilead. A bit like you have Athens, Greece, and Athens, Georgia. There's also this city of Ashtaroth. Ashtaroth was named after a Canaanite fertility goddess of the same name. And that was where Og, the king of Bashan, lived, who was apparently a giant. So this part of the story, when Israel came into this land of Gilead, is recounted by Moses in the first couple of chapters of the book of Deuteronomy. After they left Egypt, they crossed the wilderness and came to the city of Kadesh Barnea, which would eventually be basically the southern border of Israel. And that's where the spies were sent out into the land and came back to say it was far too difficult to conquer. There's these enormous people everywhere. There's huge grapes, which wasn't so much a problem. But they turned around and they kept wandering through the desert for several years. So Deuteronomy 2, verse 1 says, "Then we turned and took our journey into the wilderness by the way of the Red Sea," which is kind of this path along here. "As the Lord spake unto me, and we compassed Mount Seir for many days." Mount Seir is up there. As kind of it's sort of the city, the capital of the Edomite, the children of Esau. "Compassed Mount Seir many days, and the Lord spake unto me, saying, You've compassed this mountain long enough. Turn you northward, and command thou the people, saying, Ye are to pass through the coast of your brethren, the children of Esau, which dwell in Seir, and they shall be afraid of you. Take ye good heed unto yourselves, therefore, meddle not with them. For I will not give you of their land, no, not so much of footbreadth, for I have given unto Mount Seir, unto Esau for a possession." So the Edomites, these guys down here, the children of Esau, they lived in a very rocky set of mountains along here, right on the edge of the Negev desert. This is the kind of place that they built. They carved a lot of their buildings straight into the stone of the cliffs all around them. And this is the remnants of one of the buildings in a city called Petra, which is right there. So Mount Seir is about there, and then Petra is here, and then Teman is another major city of the Edomites, which is mentioned in a few books of the Bible. So this is what remains of the buildings in Petra, which was an ancient Edomite city. And buildings like this in the top of Mount Seir made the place very well defended and very safe from armies. Obadiah and Jeremiah both describe the Edomites as dwelling in the cleft of the rock, and you can see why that is. They're literally carved themselves into the stone. It says in, for example, Jeremiah 49:16, "O thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, that holdest the heights of the hill, though thou shouldst make thy nest as high as the eagle, I will bring thee down from thence, saith the Lord." So that they were very proud of their security in these stone buildings. But from there, the children of Israel kept on moving further north up into the land of Moab. And here's those green fields I was talking about before. So the parts of Moab closest to the Jordan, which like down there, since it's right on the banks of the Dead Sea, it's really dry and dead. But once you get up into the highlands and these these plains, the tablelands, they get a lot of rainfall. They get these wide green pastures. It's great country for cattle, as the children of Israel saw. This photo is just outside of Dibon, which is right there, and that is another one of these long-lasting cities. That was the ancient capital of Moab. And God told the people of Israel to be at peace with the Moabites as well. Deuteronomy 2, verse 9. And the Lord said unto me, distress not the Moabites, neither contend with them in battle, for I will not give thee of their land for a possession, because I have given Ar unto the children of Lot for a possession. He then goes on to say the same thing about the Ammonites who live in that area just a bit further north. So the Moabites and the Ammonites, they were both Lot's children, and Lot was Abraham's nephew, but was more like an adopted son, really. And if you remember that verse I read earlier, when God was promising Abraham the promised land, he was promising it to Abraham and the children of Abraham. It wasn't just to Jacob and Israel, it was to Abraham, Abraham's son Isaac, Ishmael, Lot's children, down to Jacob, Esau, all of Esau's children, the Edomites. So this wasn't just for Israel. Jacob and Israel had to share it. He had to share it with his brother Esau, had to share it with his cousins, had to share it with his second cousins. And that always works out really well. So the Israelites continued on northward. In Deuteronomy chapter 2, verse 13, it says, now rise up, said I, and get you over the brook Zered. And we went over the brook Zered, uh, and the space in which we came from Kadesh Barnea, until we come over the brook Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war were wasted out from among the host, as the Lord sware unto them. So they got up into the land of Gilead, but the Ammonites and the Moabites weren't the only ones there. Oh, sorry. Uh, but yeah, so they got up into the land of Gilead, and the Ammonites and the Moabites were there, and they were told to leave them alone. But there were also another group called the Amorites. It sounds like the Ammonites, but they're slightly different. The Amorites were people who had been in this land since time immemorial. Like they were the original inhabitants of the land, well before any of Abraham's children started to move in. The Amorites had their own city, their own capital city in this city of Heshbon. In Deuteronomy 2, verse 26, it says, and I sent messengers out of the wilderness of Kedemoth unto Sihon, king of Heshbon, with words of peace, saying, let me pass through thy land. I will go along the highway. I will neither turn to the right nor the left. Thou shalt sell me meat for money, that I may eat, and give me water for money, that I may drink. Only I will pass through on my feet. So Moses, even though he wasn't required of the Lord to do this, he gave the Amorites, I'm going to get them mixed up. He gave the Amorites the same fair deal that he gave to the family of the Hebrews, even though they weren't a Hebrew nation. And it was a good deal too, because usually, like in those times, when an army or when a nation would go wandering through the land, they wouldn't have a whole lot of food with them, and they'd have to scavenge and scout. And they would send out raiding parties to go and steal things from everyone all around. They'd take all your livestock, they'd break into your storehouses, they'd steal all your crops, they'd pick all the fruit from your trees. They'd basically just strip the land bare as they walked through, like a herd of a swarm of locusts coming through. But Moses was, I mean, for the standards of the day, they were being very, very well behaved. But regardless, the Amorites were having none of it. Deuteronomy 2, verse 30, we pick it up again. But Sihon, king of Heshbon, would not let us pass by him. For the Lord thy God hardened his heart, and he made his heart obstinate, that he might deliver him into thy hand, as appeareth this day. And the Lord said unto me, behold, I have begun to give Sihon and his land before thee. Begin to possess, that thou mayest inherit his land. I mean, by that statement alone, the land of Gilead was absolutely a legitimate part of Israel's inheritance. God said, start possessing this land. This is your land. This is part of your promised land. And, you know, but it's got God's endorsement on it. You know, they were the tribes that remained behind to live in that country were absolutely in obedience to the will of God. We continue on in Deuteronomy 2, verse 32. Then Sihon came out against us. That's from Heshbon, and he attacked them down here, that little explosion thing is. Sihon came out against us, he and all his people, and we took all his cities at that time, and utterly destroyed the men and the women and the little ones of every city. We left none to remain. Only the cattle we took for a prey unto ourselves, and the spoil of the cities which we took, from Aroer, which is by the brink of the river Arnon, it's down there, uh, even unto Gilead. So they took from there right the way through the top. And there was not one city too strong for us. The Lord our God delivered all unto us. And then they continued even further north and fought against Og, the king of Bashan, in somewhere around there. I don't, probably up there where it says Bashan, right? Um, Fought Og, defeated Og, took more cities along the way. Uh, then in Deuteronomy 3, verse 3, it says, so the Lord our God delivered into our hands Og also, the king of Bashan, and all his people. And we smote him until none was left to him remaining. And we took all his cities at that time, and there was not a city which we took not from them. 60 cities, 60 cities, and all the region of Argob, the kingdom of Og in Bashan. I think that's a really great name, Og, especially for a giant. Um, now, all of this happened over the course of the 2 years. So remember, they were at Kadesh Barnea at got across the Zered in year 38, spent the next 2 years, 39 and 40, fighting their way through Gilead, and then year 40 they finally crossed. So all this conquest of this area took them about 2 years. It wasn't just overnight. And while most of the men were off fighting, sort of up in these northern regions, the women, the children, their families and their flocks were all still kind of camping out in this land of the Moabites. They left all their people behind there, and this caused a bit of a strain. Um, my granny used to love this quote from Benjamin Franklin. It's guests like fish begin to smell after 3 days. So you can imagine after 2 years of having people camped out in your backyard, they'd started to wear out their welcome. And this was roughly the area where they were camped. Numbers 22, verse 1. And the children of Israel set forward and pitched in the plains of Moab on this side Jordan by Jericho. And Balak the son of Zippor saw all that Israel had done to the Amorites. And Moab was sore afraid of the people, because there were many. And Moab was distressed because of all the children of Israel. And Moab said unto the elders of Midian, now shall this company lick up all that are around us, as the ox licketh up the grass of the field. So they were afraid. According to Numbers chapter 1, when the Israelites left Egypt, there were about 600,000 people after they left Egypt. And in the 40 years following, wandering through the wilderness, I mean, that's a full generation. They probably doubled in number to about 1 million. So in basically this region here, you've got 1 million extra people coming in, and that's 1 million people with all their flocks and with all their herds, probably several million more sheep and cattle, all competing for the same scraggly bits of greenery that you happen to have on the edge of the desert there. It's going to put a lot of stress on the land and the people and the relationships that you have. They may be relatives of Moab, but 2 years later, they've absolutely overstayed their welcome. So, continues in Numbers 22, verse 5. He sent messengers, therefore, unto Balaam the son of Beor to Pethor. Pethor was right up there on the edge of the Euphrates, 360 miles away from Moab. Balaam wasn't a local at all. He was probably some kind of famous, like world famous prophet or witch doctor or something that Balak had heard about. So he sent messengers to Balaam the son of Beor to Pethor, which is by the river of the children of his people, or the Euphrates, to call him, saying, behold, there is a people come out of Egypt. Behold, they cover the face of the earth, and they abide over against me. Come now, therefore, I pray thee, curse me this people, for they are too many for me. Peradventure I shall prevail, that we may smite them, that I may drive them out of the land. For I wot that he that thou blessed is blessed, and he who thou cursest is cursed. So he recognized that Balaam had some kind of power, and by all accounts, he was on speaking terms with God. He's a bit of a strange fellow. It seems like maybe God wasn't the only spirit that he was talking to, and there's some kind of suspicious witchery going on. But anyway, God uses the people that he wants to use. but Balaam understands that when God's in the mix, that he has to play by God's rules. So Numbers 22:38, Balaam said unto Balak, Lo, I am come unto thee. Have I now any power at all to say anything? The word that God puts in my mouth, that shall I speak. And when Balaam saw that it pleased the Lord to bless Israel, he went not, as at other times, to seek for enchantments. So he didn't use his regular witchy magic that he used for everything else, because the Lord was involved. And, well, you can't really do that when the Lord's involved. So Balaam and Balak went to the top of a high place on what's called Mount Pisgah, I think, to look over the encampment of the Israelites. And this is actually a photo from the top of Mount Pisgah looking over the plains of Moab. It may very well be the same view that Balaam and Balak looked over. And you can just imagine the tents of the Israelites filling up this entire area. Um, and from here, Balaam blessed Israel 3 times instead of cursing them, as Balak had instructed him. So in Numbers 23, one of the blessings that he says, God is not a man that he should lie, neither the Son of Man that he should repent. Hath he said, and shall he not do it? Or hath he spoken, and shall he not make it good? Behold, I have received commandment to bless, and he hath blessed, and I cannot reverse it. He has not beheld iniquity in Jacob, neither hath he seen perverseness in Israel. The Lord his God is with him, and the shout of a king is among them. God brought them out of Israel. He hath, as it were, the strength of a unicorn. So, he recognized that the people of God were blessed people, and that nothing he could do, there was no power on earth that he could do to reverse that blessing. The blessing that God had given them was permanent and absolute. So not long after this, the Israelites started their invasion of Canaan. They all gathered together in Moab, and they crossed the Jordan and fought against Jericho and the rest of it. By this time, Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh had all decided that they were going to take their inheritance from the nice cattle country on the east side of the Jordan. Numbers 32 says, Now the children of Reuben and the children of Gad had a very great multitude of cattle. And when they saw the land of Jazer and the land of Gilead, that behold, the place was a place for cattle, the children of Gad and the children of Reuben came and spake to Moses and to Eleazar the priest, and unto the princes of the congregation, saying, The country which the Lord smote before the congregation of Israel is a land for cattle, and thy servants have cattle. Wherefore, say they, if we have found grace in thy sight, let this land be given unto thy servants for a possession, and bring us not over Jordan. So Moses, by this point, had seen a lot of misbehavior from the Israelites, had seen every excuse under the sun for rebellion. I think by this point in his life, Moses had become jaded and suspicious of the Israelites. Began to suspect the worst of all their intentions at all times. So over the next few verses, he gives these tribes an absolute earful about being slackers and sinners, and just like their fathers before them, that they were going to bring down the wrath of God upon the people and all that. But they assure him that that's not the case. Numbers 32, verse 16. They came near unto him and said, We'll build sheepfolds here for our cattle, and cities for our little one, but we ourselves will go ready armed before the children of Israel. When this fight happens, we're going to be right in the front. We're going to be right in the thick of it. Um, we'll go ready armed before the children of Israel until we have brought unto them their peace. And our little ones shall dwell in the fenced cities because of the inhabitants of the land. We will not return unto our houses until the children of Israel have inherited every man his inheritance. Like, they were willing to put in the hard yards and contribute to the work of conquering the land just as much as anyone else, and put themselves right in the front. There was no lack of zeal, there was no lack of faith here, just a kind of practical pragmatism to say, look, it's more sensible for us to keep our cattle on these flat lands than to go over to all the mountains and have cows up on these hills, which is just going to be difficult to manage. Nothing about forsaking the Lord or rebelling or anything like that. And after the fighting was over, um, they conquered the land. They helped out with the rest of the Israel conquering the land. The 2.5 tribes returned to their land to the east of Jordan, and they built a monumental altar to the Lord. Um, and immediately, as soon as they did that, the rest of Israel was suspicious of them again. Joshua 22, verse 9 says, "The children of Reuben and the children of Gad and the half tribe of Manasseh returned and departed from the children of Israel out of Shiloh, which is in the land of Canaan." So it's somewhere around there. There it is, Shiloh. So they'd all got together at the very end of their conquest. Everyone met together at Shiloh, and then they all split up their separate ways to go and take their inheritance again. And when they came to the borders of Jordan, which are that are in the land of Canaan, they built there an altar by Jordan, a great altar to see to. And when the children of Israel heard of it, the whole congregation gathered themselves together at Shiloh to go up to war against them. So it doesn't matter what they do, they can't seem to catch a break. So the eastern tribes, over the next few verses, they explain to the rest of Israel, they put up this altar as a reminder to future generations that even though we live on the other side of the river, we're still part of the same people. We still follow the same God. This altar wasn't an alternative to the temple at Jerusalem or the tabernacle at the time. It was a symbol of unity. It was a symbol to remind their children that we're the same people as the Israelites on the West Bank. But it's just the way that it goes. It's sometimes you'll get people who always assume the worst of your intentions, no matter what you do. So to wrap it up, the people of Gilead seemed a bit like they were cut off from the rest of Israel. Seemed a bit maybe like they were at risk of falling away into the worship of the gods of the land. And certainly there was some risk involved in being on the other side of Jordan at times. They did suffer their fair share of raids from neighboring countries like the Syrians and the Assyrians later on. Um, but at other times, the east bank of Jordan was a safer place to be. When Absalom staged a coup d'etat against his father David, David fled over the Jordan into the land of Gilead because it was safer. During the time of King Saul, when the Philistines attacked, a lot of the Israelites fled over the Jordan into the land of Gilead because it was a safer place to be. And I think there's a good comparison to be made between the land of Gilead and small little isolated assemblies like ours. You know, the small isolated offshoots of assemblies as well, like people who zoom in, like me up here in Rhode Island, or Bruce over in Tennessee, I think, or the Niznanskis up near the North Pole somewhere. We're still spiritually part of that same church, where we might be sort of isolated in the land of Gilead, but we're still we're still spiritually in that promised land. Before I moved out here, I talked to a married couple who'd lived out at Woomera, which is a very remote, isolated town in South Australia. And they were on their own there for a couple of years. And what they told me was this: the isolation and being apart from everything else makes you realize that your salvation is your own responsibility, wholly and solely. There's no pastor nearby to whip you into shape. There's no saints around to keep you accountable. But at the same time, even if you're surrounded by 1,000 saints down at Carrickillinga camp, that's not going to bring you salvation. Just like living in a small assembly somewhere out the back of Burke, beyond the Black Stump, it's not going to condemn you to hell. Because when it comes down to it, whether you're fellowshipping at the Vogue or on a Zoom call from out Whoop Whoop somewhere, your salvation is a personal relationship between you and God, just as it was for the people in the land of Gilead. And I'd like to leave it there.